So, who will you be hearing from today? Well, I'm Gemma Baukis, a member of the ReadyKey marketing team. I work closely with our teams to establish ReadyKey as the leading mobile technology company within the EHS and compliance spaces. I'm now going to hand things over to our speakers, Shannon Janji and Mike Zimmerman, to introduce themselves. Shannon.
Perfect, thank you so much, Gemma. Hi everyone, I'm Shannon, EHS software advisor here at ReadyKey. We've been building powerful mobile apps since 2011 for a variety of use cases and are lucky enough to support companies such as Johnson & Johnson, Mondelez, BAE Systems, the world's largest beverage manufacturer, and many, many more. We help them to provide critical information to their employees that's quick and easy to access anywhere and anytime. Mike, over to you.
Thanks, Shannon. My name is Mike Zimmerman. I'm with BSI. I'm our South Region Environmental Services Leader. I've got over 30 years of experience with environmental health safety regulations and auditing, and going to be talking about some of my experience that can help you with managing hazardous materials today.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Mike. I thought it would be good for us today to start by sharing some statistics that caught my attention as I was researching this topic. So first up, according to OSHA, there are as many as 650,000 hazardous chemical products at workplaces across the United States alone. So no matter what industry you work in, it's incredibly likely there will be some hazardous materials to be aware of in your environment. Now, as I'm sure the audience here probably already knows, OSHA states that any business which stores and exposes workers to hazardous substances must have a safety data sheet for every chemical at the work site, and that SDS must be accessible within 5 minutes of any event. But did you know that hazard communication has appeared in OSHA's top 10 annual violations for the past 18 years in a row? And after a little digging, I've found that the most common citations within the standard over the years have been for failing to maintain proper chemical labeling and for failing to keep SDS libraries consistently up to date. We also see that fines and penalties from regulators can be particularly significant when it comes to chemical-related violations due to the potential severity of any fallout. In fact, just last year, in 2021, there was a total of over $200 million worth of fines handed out for chemical-related incidents by themselves. Now, unfortunately, the impact of failure can be detrimental and catastrophic. OSHA estimates that there are 50,000 deaths from chemical exposure each year, a number which drastically needs to be reduced and can be reduced. So whilst it's true that hazardous chemicals are part and parcel of our everyday work environment, they also pose a huge danger to the health and safety of employees, which is why it's so important to be aware of the challenges surrounding chemical preparedness. So what are some of these challenges that we are always up against when it comes to safely managing hazardous materials? Well, I just mentioned how there are over 650,000 chemical products in the workplace. And with such a vast amount of information on each of these chemicals available, employees cannot be expected to remember everything. And when it comes to permissible exposure levels, OSHA states there are approximately 500 different limits. It's simply too much to expect training and memory to be sufficient. But we also see challenges in complex working environments, such as laboratories, agriculture, even industrial production, where several chemicals are being used at once and in a fast-paced environment. These environments can easily result in some containers being opened and unlabeled for periods of time, or situations can arise where only a handful of people know what the contents of a container may be, which of course creates its own set of potentially damaging consequences. Desensitization can be a big challenge, and one you actually don't often realize is a problem until it's too late. As massive explosions or huge leaks into the environment thankfully become much more of a rare event, complacency can often set in, and the importance of constant preventative and proactive measures can be lost or forgotten. Hazard communication is a consistent challenge, and I just mentioned how it has been in the top 10 OSHA violations for the past 18 years running. But with ever-changing rules and regulations, even different regions having different rules too, it can be incredibly difficult to communicate these hazards clearly and consistently with employees, especially so when there are multiple different spoken languages across the workforce. And a final, big challenge that we often hear and come across is that anyone working with chemicals is that the regulators do not shy away from making examples out of the companies who fail on their duties to protect employees and the environment from hazardous material. Some of the biggest fines ever recorded in history are in relation to hazardous material impact on our global environment. I'm sure we all remember the Deepwater Horizon disaster in 2010 fairly well, for which BP received a fine of $13.8 billion. And yes, that was billion, not million, just in case anyone thought that was a typo. But it's not just large enterprise companies that regulators look at. In 2021, a company with less than 3,000 employees was fined $1.5 million. Those challenges that we just mentioned and discussed are always present. But over the past year, there have been a number of factors creating new challenges that require specific attention now. So what are some of those factors? Well, I'm sure we've all heard about and the impact of the Great Resignation. According to the Society of Human Resource Management, last year, 47.8 million workers quit their jobs, an average of 4 million a month, meaning 2021 now holds the highest average on record. COVID-19 and the pandemic has caused a lot of people to rethink their personal priorities and question what is actually important to themselves, which has created a lot of staff movement. Employees are changing jobs at unprecedented rates, which has resulted in a lot of new staff at many companies. But a lot of these new team members may not be fully trained and as prepared as the previous set of employees were. For example, knowing specifically who has completed which training modules during periods of high staff turnover is a particular challenge that we hear and come across a lot. And to add to these concerns, an aging workforce with many pivotal team members approaching retirement or leaving for more senior roles, this can create extra knowledge gaps across the organization. As the most trained and experienced staff leave, ensuring new employees are brought up to speed quickly and efficiently is vital. Safe chemical management is also particularly relevant right now, as in 2021, during the midst of the pandemic, changes were proposed to OSHA's annual communication standard to bring it in line with the global harmonized system for managing hazardous chemicals. As all focus was kept on businesses keeping running during the pandemic, some employers and employees may not be fully aware of the proposed changes. And just to give a quick overview, some of the main differences proposed are surrounding chemical labeling and the images used, further classification of regulation requirements, and new classifications completely for gases and aerosols. We've also seen a real increase in monetary fines from regulators as the pressure to limit environmental impact keeps growing while we continue to fight climate change. In fact, just last month, a recycling company was fined $311,000 after OSHA found 28 serious violations in their last inspection. And already this year, we've seen one of the largest chemical producers in the world settle a case for $25 million, which is a pretty hefty amount when you compare it to fines from previous years. And now I'm going to hand over to Mike so that you can hear his thoughts on a topic he's a true expert on. At BSI Group are one of our consultancy partners, and we've worked with them on a number of some of our largest and most successful deployments. I'll be back after Mike to talk about where we think MOBA can help to make a difference. So Mike, over to you.
Thank you, Shannon. Yeah, so let's talk about some of the things that we see with issues with managing hazardous materials in the workplace. A number of issues kind of apply to a lot of our clients that we see, whether high tech, biotech, oil and gas, Department of Defense, and government agencies, healthcare, et cetera. And one of the key things is that we're seeing that clients are not having really sustainable programs. As Shannon mentioned, we're having staff turnover due to people leaving for resignation or aging workforce or just changing roles at the company. And a lot of sites don't have a sustainable program that can pick up right away when somebody does leave a role that manages hazardous materials. We do have some clients that have had really quick turnaround. As quick as 3 to 6 months, somebody's in a role. We bring them on board, train them, and then they leave right away. That could be for an internal job or an external job that might come up. So obviously it's very difficult to keep a program in compliance with this type of turnover. We do know that some of the key things related to hazard communication are having a written HazCom program, properly using the hazardous labels and warnings, knowing where your safety data sheets are and pulling the information from those, and then doing the actual training that's required to inform employees about the safety data sheets, about the labeling, about the hazards related to chemicals. Failure to provide and document the employee HazCom training is among one of the most commonly cited violations of this standard every year. Another aspect of hazard communication and hazardous material management is related to process safety management. And Shannon mentioned there were a significant number of deaths last year related to hazardous material management. And these typically are at the higher hazard facilities that are regulated under OSHA's process safety management program. But as we know, some of those incidents actually occur at the lower risk sites also. Just incompatible materials being managed together, creating a fire or explosion, or an off gas of a toxic material can create a lethal situation for employees and for people off site also if it's a big enough event. So the hazard communication standard was enacted in 2012, and it was basically a global system to harmonize how people classify and label chemicals. It's since its implementation in 2012, it has consistently ranked among the top 3 most common OSHA citations. Labeling is something very common at almost every site. Even the best managed sites could have a couple labeling issues. Either 1 or 2 staff were not trained properly or did not retain the information, or let's say their training was going to occur next week and they're already handling hazardous materials now. Some issues with timing of training can create situations also. So interestingly enough, OSHA has increased its civil penalties for violations of the workplace safety standards. The current values for civil penalties are on the screen. You can see for willful and repeat violations, the penalty increased to over $145,000. For a serious violation, it could be $14,500, and the minimum penalty for a willful violation is currently at $10,360. So you can see that significant fines could be applied if a facility doesn't comply with the workplace safety standards. And there are times when they'll take these violations and they'll multiply them by the number of days that the violation occurred. So fines can be very significant, and you can see as high as $145,000. So what are some lessons learned? What can you do? 1, to make things safer for your employees. 2, to lower the liability and risk for your facility. And 3, to hopefully prevent fines or violations if an agency does come and inspect. So first thing, obviously communication is important. Keeping staff up to date on new regulations or potential dangers to be aware of, or if a new chemical is coming into the facility, they need to be aware of what the chemicals hazards are, what chemicals it may be incompatible with that are already on site, keeping those separate, not letting them mix in any way to create a potential dangerous situation. Also, we need to focus on awareness. Our employees are aware of what needs to be done in terms of PPE, personal protective equipment, and reporting incidents. We need to be proactive, ensuring employee knowledge is 100%. Training is the most obvious thing you can do to keep employees aware of the dangers that are in the workplace. Providing better training than in the past, not just simple the PowerPoint slide presentations, but engaging in interactive onboarding and continuous training. We found also that when you provide a training once a year for 4 to 8 hours, that knowledge is retained for a short period of time, but unless people are working with it daily, the training basically disintegrates over time. And so that shorter training sessions continuously, like once a month, are much better also. Another key thing is to have mock drills. Have a drill where you act out a spill situation and people having to go to safety data sheets and clean up the spill and who they need to notify. This will help them retain data much more than even a very good interactive training session. So labeling, as we mentioned, one of the key issues out there. You can see some photos on the right. I see sites all the time that have a large tank with no label on it, and clients will tell me that's a water tank. And I tell them, well, you need to label it. If the fire department comes in, they're responding to an incident here on site, they're going to want to know what's in the tank. They're going to want to be sure that it's not a hazardous material that can create a runaway reaction of some sort. So we always want to ensure that all materials, including non-hazardous materials like water tanks, are always correctly labeled. Due to staff turnover, use of contractors and visitors, it can never be assumed that all personnel have accurate knowledge of hazmat storage. For example, the photo on the top right is in a fume hood. And I see this quite often where a bottle might be reused for different chemicals, or there's no label on a small container, and the scientist or technician that was working with the material knows what it is, but other people may not. So we need to label those types of things to ensure that they're not accidentally poured down the drain or mixed with another material that they're incompatible with. And obviously we need to highlight the importance of maintaining proper labeling during our training, during internal audits, just checking, walking through areas and confirming that staff are properly labeling items. So a couple key simple implementations you can do to have a sustainable program. This may seem very simple, but just having a backup for key roles. We see a number of sites where there's just one primary person managing hazardous materials and labeling and training. That person leaves, they're on vacation, they win the lottery, they're not there tomorrow. What do we do? Well, we need to have some type of key backup and somebody that can step in and knows the information as well as the primary. There's not enough time typically. If somebody gets 2 weeks notice, it's typically not enough time to transfer all the knowledge that's necessary. So we need a key backup to make sure that tribal knowledge is not lost. We need to always keep an up-to-date, easily accessible electronic record of information and consider digital tools and software to keep data and training videos. We found this is important. Having easy access to digital tools that employees can get to really easily on a phone, on a tablet, or on their laptop will make it much better for them and easier for them to get the information they need. There's not going to be the hindrance that might be there if they've got to go ask somebody or have some other special computer they need to go to for the information. Thank you very much. Back to you, Shannon.
Perfect. Thank you so much for the insights, Mike. I really appreciate you sharing your expertise and experience with us today. In case the rest of you didn't know, I'm by no means an EHS expert, but we are mobile experts here at ReadyKey and have seen mobile increasingly solve complex challenges like the ones we're discussing today. And I just want to take the opportunity to be very clear. Today's session is not a ReadyKey sales pitch. What I'm about to cover in the final minutes is applicable to mobile in general, and hopefully you can take something away with you today, whether you use our tool or not. So, how can mobile help? Well, perhaps more so than any other emergency, finding the most up-to-date information in as short a period of time as possible is absolutely critical in reducing risks and improving outcomes with hazardous chemical incidents. Mobile applications give employees access to critical chemical safety information immediately. The time spent searching through vast amount of paper-based information can be reduced to seconds with mobile. Not only can this time saved improve efficiency and productivity in the workplace, but a fast reaction can significantly reduce the impacts from any hazardous material emergency. But not only is mobile the quickest solution, it's also the most accessible too. Most of us have our mobiles in our pockets at all times. And when we need to know something quickly, our pocket is where we reach first. And further on top of that, mobile has the ability to provide information without an internet connection, something we believe is truly paramount to mobile software to further increase accessibility. Mobile can also help to make sure the information you provide to employees is the most accurate version. Using integrations saves you from having to manage updates in multiple places, creating a single source of truth. So if something is changed on one system, a good mobile app should automatically update to reflect those changes without any manual input. Knowing the information employees can access is always up to date, gives peace of mind for leaders, and should spare you those middle of the night phone calls that we all hate. Now, sharing critical resources with employees via mobile is a great way to easily demonstrate compliance to regulators when they come knocking at the door for an inspection. There's arguably no better way to combat those poor hazard communication citations than with a mobile app, as you can simply show that every staff member has immediate access to hazard comms in their pocket at all times. Another fantastic benefit of mobile is the multi-language support that you can tap into. OSHA requires every employer to provide information to employees in a language and vocabulary they can understand, which can be a real challenge for companies of any size to stay up to date with, as sometimes there might only be one version of information for each non-English language. But mobile can make that a lot simpler and easier for everyone involved. You can be confident that no matter the language, your staff can always understand the information needed and easily access that anytime. We now live in a world where we use our mobiles every day. In fact, it's actually pretty hard to avoid using your phone on any given day. I mean, how many of you are within touching distance of a mobile device as we speak? This has really created a familiarity with our mobiles that can never be replicated through paper or with a computer. And we find employees are much more likely to engage and complete required tasks if it's easy for them to do so and in a manner they're already familiar with. But it doesn't stop at documentation. Forward-thinking companies are increasingly utilizing the multimedia power of mobile to enhance learning and training, similar to what Mike just mentioned. For example, with mobile, it's possible to arm your workforce with a library of how-to style videos for any task right in their pocket. In a situation where an employee is unsure on how to complete a task, they no longer need to waste time finding the correct instructions, as a quick and helpful video is only a couple of taps away. And now, to help bring some of this to life, we've got a 30-second video clip of our ReadyKey mobile app platform in action, giving a quick example of what it could be like accessing critical information from mobile devices. And now, before we hit play, I just want to say that everything you see here is completely customizable, from the layout to every word and every picture and icon. And we believe customization is a critical component for a successful mobile tool, as no two companies' needs are ever the same. Now, this video moves quick. So as we hit play, you can see from the menu, we go for emergency action plans, and we're going to choose English, as I don't speak Spanish or French. We can search for spills and immediately be taken to the relevant information. But perhaps we need to know more. We can access a PDF with a safety data sheet. This is accessible without internet, just to say. And now if we needed to report a major event, this can easily be done in a couple of taps from the main menu too. We have customizable forms with different question types, so you can make sure the data you collect is accurate, even extra question branches if there has been an injury and you need more data. Now, I know that was super fast, but hopefully it gives an idea of the power of what can be possible. And finally, it would be remiss of me if I didn't quickly shout out some of the other ways that mobile can support you. And all of these capabilities and a lot more are available in the ReadyKey platform. And I'm going to run through them super quickly just to leave you with some food for thought. The first up, multiple languages, ensures inclusivity across the workforce with multi-language support. Resources allow you to provide internal and external documents, as well as relevant, accurate, location-specific information. For example, if you work in California, you only want to show those staff what's relevant to them there, not local Minnesota news. Offline access, exactly as it says, ensures information is always available no matter what. Quizzes, surveys, forms, all support interactive learning, knowledge checks, gathering feedback, incident reporting, and a lot more. Push notifications, which can be sent to all employees or even specific groups based on location, job role, or seniority, for example, are key. And making information easily accessible, which is all about getting people to the information they need as soon as they need it. Lots of our clients say that a mobile helps them implement a no excuses culture. For example, if a QR code is easily visible and available, employees should know they can scan that to get to the document in 1 second. And even without QR scanning codes, an app should be simple and enjoyable to download and interactive for everyone. And that's me done. So thank you everyone for joining today. I'm now going to hand back over to Gemma.
Thank you so much to Mike Zimmerman and Shannon Janji for sharing your insights there. As I did say earlier, we had a lot of information to share with you today, and we have had some great questions coming. And although we have run out of time for a live Q&A today, we will follow up with you, each of you directly afterwards. So thank you so much for joining today. We will be following up with all of you who registered for the webinar with a recording of the session, along with a copy of the slides. On the screen now, you'll see the contact details for today's speakers, Shannon Janji and Mike Zimmerman. And you can also reach out to them directly with any additional questions that you might have. Just lastly, if you have enjoyed the webinar today, please do follow both ReadyKey and BSI on LinkedIn, where you'll find lots more educational content on a variety of subjects. And the same can also be said for our websites, which you can see displayed on the screen now. Thank you again for joining us today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your week.